Pull over. Let's get something to eat.
Capacity!
What do you mean capacity? I've got to get this man into emergency.
This ward is full. We have reached capacity.
Oh my God. We've reached capacity.
Ain't nothing changed, nothing new here to see. This ain't nothing but some political maneuvering.
America.
Welcome to the eulogy, eat it up. It's called political buffoonery.
Oh no, we've reached capacity. Welcome to This Week in DUMBmocracy, where we showcase some of the dumbest newsmakers of the week. So for today's video, we're going to be discussing Governor Maura Healey's decision to declare a state of emergency in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts over the migrant crisis. But before we get to the video, please subscribe to the channel, smash that thumbs up button, like, share, comment. We're going to be talking about an issue we already talked about with the People's Republic of New York City. Everyone's at
Capacity!
There's no more room for any more migrants to come into New York or apparently Massachusetts now. So this is from Boston Public Radio's Ask the Governor that they do monthly on WGBH, which I believe is a public station. And this was on the same day that Governor Healey declared a state of emergency over the migrant crisis because they're at
Capacity!
they can't handle any more people coming in. They can't handle any more migrants knocking on their door, and apparently they're out of resources. But there are certain comments from Governor Healey here that are really buffoonish, and I'm going to point them out as we go along. Here's the video.
You declared a state of emergency regarding our shelter services just today. What's going on?
Yeah, today I declared an emergency, and it's important for people to understand what's happening, what's been happening in our state. We are dealing with a humanitarian crisis. We're seeing it here in Massachusetts. We're seeing it across the country. There are so many migrants arriving into our states on a daily basis. And for a state like ours, where there have been tremendous supports and resources as a general matter for housing, our shelter system, our housing system is really incredibly strained. And so it's reached a point where I needed to declare an emergency here in Massachusetts to do a few things. One, to ask for federal intervention and for the federal government to take some necessary steps.
So we're hearing a lot of the same talking points that we heard from the People's Republic of New York City. We need the federal government to step up. We need them to take action. And it's going to be for the same thing, to get people working, to authorize the right to work for these migrants, and also federal money to support the states who are bearing the burden of this. And again, Massachusetts, heavily Democratic state, we have a Democrat in the White House who can deal with all this. But why isn't he? This is, as I said in the previous video, a capitulation by the states that there's an emergency, but you can't have Joe Biden say that there's an emergency at our southern border, because that'll go against the whole narrative of Mayorkas, the Homeland Security Secretary. It'll go against the whole narrative that his whole administration has been dealing with, because they've been saying that there isn't a crisis and that this can be handled. Let's continue on with the video.
One, that is funding, and two, it's the expediting of work authorizations. These migrants who have come, they are so anxious to work. They are ready to work. I cannot tell you, having talked with and met many of these migrants, they are here today with certifications, with licenses from other countries, with incredible language capabilities. Most of the Haitian immigrants who are arriving here, in fact, have come through Central and South America. They have learned Spanish along the way. I met folks the other day. They're ready to go to work in construction as welders, driving trucks, teaching French, you name it. And we know that employers across industries here in Massachusetts are anxious for more workers and workforce. And so it's a call to action.
So that sounded a little bit like exploitation to me. Anybody that has a job in construction or is driving a car, these are not exactly, high-paying jobs. These are jobs that, frankly, everyday middle-class Americans need. To think that those jobs can be filled by migrants who came here illegally, that sounds a little exploitative to me. That, they're not getting doctors, they're not getting professionals here, but we can get all these workers in to take all the jobs that we need in our state. Well, what about Americans who are ready to work now at these jobs? I'm sure that there are plenty of citizens that can do those jobs as well. It just sounded a touch exploitative to me, what the governor was saying here. So while we can reasonably argue back and forth about Governor Healey's motivation in talking about the great jobs that are going to be out there for migrants, what comes next is really surprising to me.
Mass.gov/shelter crisis. You'll see a landing page that shows all the different ways that you, as a resident, as a community, as a temple, as a congregation, can get involved and help. The single greatest need right now is for housing. So anyone out there with housing, anyone with property that could be used to house people. We've been talking to college presidents. I was up at Salem State University where our fantastic Lieutenant Governor Kim Driscoll, prior to becoming Lieutenant Governor, had opened up a shelter for migrants. You know, anybody who's got space, we want to be utilizing that.
So hey, buddy, you got a spare room? Got some spare property you're not using? Maybe some open land that you don't have? You know, in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts? Why not give that to the government to let them house migrants that probably won't pay you for it because they're at
Capacity.
Really? This is the sacrifice that you're asking people to make? Where were all these calls for goodwill when you have homeless Americans, homeless veterans as well, who need somewhere to stay? Where was the call for them, for people to donate their property to use for a homeless person from here? Like what you see so far? Go ahead and smash that thumbs up button. Also, leave us a comment and tell us what you're thinking. And don't forget to subscribe so you never miss another show.
Why is this happening now?
Because it's reached a point where the
Capacity.
just isn't sustainable. And I want to
Are
put a
people
real
coming from elsewhere? Is this another one of people being shipped up from far away to Massachusetts, or is this something different than normal?
Well, we've seen, just if you take a snapshot of last year at this time, we've seen an 80% increase. What does that look like every day? Today in Massachusetts, we will see between 10 and 20 families, 10 and 30 families arriving here in Massachusetts.
Oh, a whole 10 to 30 families a day. Forgive me if, let's say, the state of Texas doesn't empathize with Massachusetts' plight. I'm sure that they would love an influx of 10 to 30 families a day coming into their state. That would be amazing for them. They're dealing, especially the border towns in Texas, dealing with thousands of people. Thousands of people. You're complaining about 10 to 30 families a day? Really? That's how you're at
Capacity.
Maybe you should rethink your policies.
Oftentimes, they will have flown here, landed at Logan Airport. Many of them are having plane tickets bought for them by organizations and entities in Texas, churches and otherwise.
And once again, pointing out, just like I did in the previous video, there's the win for Texas. There's the win for Governor Abbott. The policy has been working. These liberal states up north are screaming about the plight of the migrant crisis. This is a pain that our southern border states have been seeing for years, with no one listening to them, with northern elites telling them, this is your problem, you have to deal with it. Well, guess what? Not anymore.
But they are arriving here, and they are arriving in numbers that are only increasing. So we don't see that abating, Marjorie.
Okay.
We see that both the administration, communities, and our existing shelter infrastructure have really been maxing out. We just simply are running out of
Capacity.
So that's why I'm declaring this an emergency. And really, to drive home the point to the federal government, we need action now.
Congress has got to do that, right? Not
No,
the administration?
The administration can do that as well.
So why is Joe Biden not doing that?
Excellent question. It's one that we answered in our previous video. Joe Biden's not doing that because he's not going to capitulate to Republicans who've been talking about a border crisis for years. He doesn't want to give a victory to Republicans in the federal government, in Congress, and those who are going to be running against him in 2024. That's why.
Well, these are hard and complicated things, these programs and the way that authorizations work. But part of what we're trying to do is to make the point that this can happen and it needs to happen, and we're going to continue to stay in touch.
So she kind of cops out on that answer, doesn't she? She doesn't talk about the real reason why Joe Biden isn't helping Massachusetts or New York City or any other place screaming about this crisis. But I did bring up a point saying that these are the policies that Massachusetts has adopted. Let's explore that for a minute. So this is a story from September of 2022. In the eyes of Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, or at least in his rationale for sending dozens of migrants by plane to Martha's Vineyard, you guys remember that, Massachusetts is a sanctuary state. On the ground here, though, the question of whether that label fits is more complicated. It depends on who you ask. Groups including the Federation for American Immigration Reform, or FAIR, and the Center for Immigration Studies do count Massachusetts on their list of sanctuary states. That's because of a July 2017 ruling from the Supreme Judicial Court that found Massachusetts does not authorize law enforcement to hold people solely on detainer requests from ICE. And I believe that case is called Lunn v. Commonwealth. You can look that up for yourself if you want. L-U-N-N. But unlike some other states, Massachusetts doesn't have a sanctuary state law on the books. So the courts ruled that Massachusetts has no law authorizing local municipalities or even state government from assisting ICE with detainers when those detainees are only being detained for federal immigration purposes. But other jurisdictions in Massachusetts have done that. The state hasn't. So, for instance, as we go down through the article here, and there's discussions about Governor Charlie Baker trying to stop it and how it became a campaign point last year. There are sanctuary cities in Massachusetts, so some voters have chosen this path, including Medford, Lexington, Boston as well. Cambridge declared itself a sanctuary city in 1985 and reaffirmed it in 2006. Northampton as well directed police not to honor or enforce ICE detainer requests. So there are jurisdictions in Massachusetts that do have sanctuary laws and ordinances, but as far as the state goes, they haven't adopted it yet. So that's going to do it for this video. Please, again, subscribe to the channel, smash that thumbs up button, like, comment, share the show with your friends so we can continue having more conversations just like this, discussing all the shenanigans and buffoonery that's going on this week in DUMBmocracy.
Capacity!
All views and opinions expressed here are not necessarily of the mainstream media and may offend some listeners. It's called political buffoonery.